person for a little while. But we are meeting in person today. It is nice to see everyone. And there are no attendees in the audience, so I will skip the notice to the public. And I don't believe we have anybody online, correct, for public comment?
We do not, excuse me, we do not. The only person we have that shows up as an attendee is one of our IT personnel, our secret shopper that
Okay,
monitors.
well, then I would suggest that there is no public comment. If that changes, if someone comes into the room, we can offer that to them a little bit later. Okay, first order of business, public awareness. Personnel. And I don't think there are any updates for personnel. There's
Yeah,
nothing on the agenda, correct?
maybe if I could just make a brief statement. I sent an email to the board members last night just to kind of tell where we're at with the COVID situation, and it's kind of spreading like wildfire here at work again. So we're trying to manage that the best we can. Director Boyd Hodgson, you mentioned that at the Wednesday board meeting, we'll be asking the board if they want to go back to virtual. That's my strong recommendation that we do so. And on the staff side, we're doing similar things. We're considering going back to the way things were, maybe more telecommuting, less people in the office, because this Omicron is highly contagious.
Mm-hmm.
So,
thank you.
And our canary in the coal mine for us is our Meadowlark reclamation facility, where you need certified operators to make sure the plant process works fine. And that group has been, at least 50% of the people have either tested positive or symptomatic and have tested and don't have the results yet. So we're monitoring that situation really closely, but it's not a plug and play. You can't just take a person from this group and put them into that group, because there's obviously you need certifications, but the biggest thing is we need to be safe, and we can't put an employee in a situation where they're not trained. So I just want to let the committee know that we're monitoring the situation as much as we can and doing everything we can to make sure we keep all of our employees safe and keep all of our operations running.
Thank you. And I think that's the key. I mean, I think COVID is not going anywhere fast. And as the virus mutates, we probably will be confronted with new and different variants. And managing it as best we can is what we can do, and making sure that the employees are safe. But
Yeah.
there are elements of business that we can still conduct. And I appreciate your managing it and attention to it, and your care for the employees, because that's very important too.
Yeah, thank you. And we kind of expected it, with the holidays, with people traveling and getting together with larger groups. We thought there'd be a spike. It's bigger than we thought it would be. We looked back a year to see, hey, how were things last January? And there was an uptick. This one's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, even the employees that have gotten sick, the symptoms are much less. They're not as impacted, no hospitalizations, nothing like that. But with the protocols that are established, even symptoms, we're putting people off work really quickly, and we run a pretty lean staff, and we start to feel it really quickly.
If an employee is out for suspected COVID, what kind of testing protocols? And I ask because I see the line at Cal State San Marcos, which stretches around the corner, and it requires people to stand in line for hours. So I'm wondering, do we have a testing mechanism in place, or do we require that they go to Cal State San Marcos or something like that to obtain a clear?
Yeah, so good question. So before this peaking started happening, again, we were sending people to Cal State, to the free testing sites, right? The waits were quick. You could almost walk through the line, and now it's not like that anymore. There's long lines. That's still an option for employees, but we do have a occupational health practitioner called Work Partners that we deal with. So we can send people directly to Work Partners, and they'll do the testing there. We can get appointments. They minimize the number of people in there, those types of things. It's expensive. It's $200. Every time we send an employee there for a test, it's $200 as opposed to free at Cal State. But when somebody goes to a free testing site, they're on our dime anyway. So we're paying their hourly rate. If they're standing in line for 4 hours, we're paying those 4 hours for the free test. Mm-hmm. But we'll do whatever we think is in the best interest. If it's a critical position like a Meadowlark reclamation facility or a water operations group, we'll pay the money. We just need to get it done as quickly as possible to determine if we can get those people back working. If it's a slightly less critical position, we'll make a decision whether we want to pay the money to send them to Work Partners or ask them to go to a free testing site. If they go to a free testing site and say, hey, it's a 4-hour wait, I don't want to wait, then we'll probably go ahead and have them go to Work Partners anyway. But So it's a case-by-case basis, but yeah, we've realized that quickly that the testing and the vaccinations are being severely impacted.
Okay, thank you.
So just a question on that as far as payroll goes. If they're out on leave because they're sick, I mean, does that go against their sick time? I mean, is there something special set up for that now? I don't even know.
Yeah, so there was a period of time where the requirement is that the public agency had to cover the sick time if people were off for COVID related. That changed, I think it was, I want to say November, December. And so right now, if somebody gets home, they're using their sick time. Unless it was for sure a work-related COVID thing. So if, let's say, somebody at work had COVID, it was later determined they had COVID, and a coworker becomes sick, it's likely, presumptive that they caught it from their coworker, then it would be on our dime. But if they just said, hey, my wife is a school teacher and I got it, then it's presumed that they caught it, then it would be their sick time. If somebody doesn't have adequate sick time, there's other provisions that kick in that we will pay for the sick leave if they've exhausted all of their sick leave.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
So that's all I wanted to share on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions around personnel? Okay, then we will move on to number 2, public awareness, new business, redistricting maps update.
Yeah, and James Gumpel is online with us. James is going to give you an update on the redistricting. Happy New Year, James. You're muted.
James.
Okay, take 2. Happy New Year and good morning, everybody. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, I will share my screen. I have a brief presentation. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes. Great.
So this is just an update on the redistricting process and where we are to date and how we're moving forward as a reminder. If you kind of remember from the last presentation, the board's seen this twice, I think. The last one was on December 1st. So we kind of had a starting point. We started working on this in October. And then we initially wanted to start the outreach before the end of the year, really in December, but really that's been pushed to January and through March. So we're planning on getting outreach going to the public in January. The product we've been working on, the main delay was getting the census block data. It took longer for the census block data to get released than we initially anticipated. We thought it'd be released in November. It really got released right in December. So the work product, we've been working on getting the maps, looking at different communities of interest, and also looking at the census and voting precinct blocks. So you have both the voting precinct blocks. You can't cut a voting precinct and put it into 2 different divisions, because that wouldn't make a lot of sense. So we've been working with the county on those. And the voting precinct blocks don't line up with the census blocks. I don't know why, but just to make matters a little bit more complicated. So right now, we're still on schedule. This stayed from the original presentations back to the board, the second board meeting in February, which I believe is the 23rd. And then the second public hearing for basically adoption of new division boundaries is still scheduled for the second board meeting in March, which is also the 23rd. So, and then basically we have to get adoption going, and get everything submitted by April 17th, which is the deadline. So if there's any major, we're going to get 2 opportunities for public comments, basically circulating maps here sometime in January. Prior to our February public hearing, another opportunity for public comments in March, and then obviously addressing the public comments, give us a little bit of time between March and April if we need to make any adjustments. So, again, this is the district overview and looking at the divisions. So if you look at it right now at the populations, and here we are based on the current census data, we're basically at these percentages. So the number 1 rule that we have to try to meet without any type of special reasoning is less than 10% difference between the largest and the smallest divisions. So currently, Division 1 and 5, if you look at them, have 11.8% difference, which is greater than that 10% allowed without some type of special exemption. The current divisions require modifications after the BBK has reviewed it, and mainly, actually, solely based on this 11.8% difference. So staff created two options to better balance the population, and today I'm going to talk to you and show you maps on those two options. Basically, we also took into account the natural boundaries such as major roads and water bodies. And I tried to show that on the map. It may be a little bit hard to see depending on the scale, but I basically showed major roads, freeway, and some of the creeks and streams also. And BDK is working with a demographer to review the division boundaries. So these boundaries that I'm going to show you today, these options, they've already been sent to the demographer to take a look at to make sure there isn't any critical issues that we have to consider that staff hasn't already addressed. So let's start with option 1. So all we're doing in option 1 is we're trying to balance out the numbers a little bit. And we've moved one section that is west of Twin Oaks Valley Road from Division 5 over to Division 3. So Division 5 currently is our largest division, or was our largest division. That basically moves a population over, and you can see it moves to Division 5. Let me go back one. But from being 5.9% over the average to almost at average at 0.9% over the average. So it moves one voting precinct west of Twin Oaks Valley Road from 5 to 3. Division 1 and 4, when you look at the biggest differences now, are still at 9.8%, which meets the 10% requirement. However, Division 5 has significant immediate growth in several areas. You got the Creek area, the Creek District, the new basically Discovery area, which over by the hospital, west of the hospital, it's growing. Of course, the whole University District area west, which is right along the freeway in Craven. So there's a lot of growth still happening in Division 5 that will kind of bump those numbers back up in the near future. The next, looking at that and looking at any Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origins, this is a map that shows where our primary communities of those ethnicities are. And as you can see, moving this one precinct from one, it really makes no difference within the Latino, Hispanic, or Spanish origin population. And you can see kind of the areas that you need to stay out of. Now, what I did get an education on is some of these areas abut major roads. But like, for example, if this is a major road, which this is Mission Road where my cursor is, the community that's south of Mission is uniquely and independently different in almost all cases as the community north of Mission, since it's basically cut by major roads. So a freeway, a major road, a water body, something significant.
I have a question. So looking at the map, looking at Division 5, there's a little bit of a bump out that goes towards my left. Is that a new area, or has that always been there?
Is this area by my cursor?
Yes.
Are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's always been there.
Okay, interesting. I don't think that's on my map at home. How strange. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. There's not a lot of, there's not that, it's a large precinct that takes, I forgot what the precinct boundary is, but it's a large precinct that crosses and comes down to the south.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not a lot of community right there. That's mainly industrial and open space, some of it. Okay, option 2 is a little bit more complicated. So starting with the easy ones, this is Agua Jarienda Creek. And we had a small section of Division 3. Sorry, is it 3? Is it mislabeled? Division 2. Sorry, I mislabeled that. Division 2, that was that crossed the creek. So this is moving that into Division 1. Here is El Norte Parkway, and we had a small portion that was on Division 3 that we moved to Division 1. So I mislabeled these. I apologize for that. I'll fix that. So that's moving a little bit of population into Division 1. And then here, this is Twin Oaks Valley Road. to Quest Haven Road. And this is a voting precinct that takes basically the area east of Twin Oaks Valley Road and north of Quest Haven Road, and moves us from Division 5 to Division 1. When you do this, it helps a lot. It adds a little bit of population to Division 1. It basically balances out Division 2. Division 4 still remains the same, unchanged, and Division 3 now gets a little bit balanced out. Division 5 goes a little bit into the negative, but almost dead even with the average. When you do this, basically your difference between 1 and 4 is now 9.1%, which meets the 10% requirement. You're not crossing any major roads, and it cleans up some existing crossings in the map. Division 5 still has that immediate growth. So in this case, this option 2 is a little bit more future-proof as far as the growth in Division 5, especially along the freeway and the creek corridor. Looking at those changes here, again, the Latino, Hispanic, or Spanish origin population is not affected. There are not any darker blue areas that are affected. So it doesn't actually cut any of those communities of interest, and it balances out the options a little bit better. So these are the two options that BBK's demographer is actually going to take a look at. We don't have results from the demographer at this point. Assuming that there's no changes, we're looking at, basically, these are the maps. Let me back up. These are the maps between option 1 and option 2 with these type of annotations. And of course, I'll fix the D1, D3 to D1, and D2 to D1 titles here that we're going to send out to the public during the outreach event prior to our February public hearing. So, total Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin populations by divisions. These don't change. So the numbers change by less than 10 when we look at option 2 and even option 1. So essentially, there's no real change in the population numbers per division. Based on finalizing the review with the demographer, staff will finalize the maps for option 1 and option 2. Assuming that there's no significant changes, we're planning on sending out to the public both of these options to look at. We're hoping to receive comments prior to the first public hearing, which is scheduled on 2/23/22. And of course, the final one is the second meeting in March, which is March 23rd, 2022. With that, this is just a brief update, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Just two. Appreciate that, James. No, great, a lot of work I know goes into drawing a bunch of lines. One, how often do we have to redistrict?
So we're required to look at redistricting every census, so roughly every 10 years.
Okay.
And obviously, the 2020 census, it takes about a year to get that information.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering. And then it looks like you definitely are looking into future growth in different areas. So my only question would be, which map would, take that into consideration more so? It sounded like number 2 to me, but that's my only caveat is just, looking into the future, because this is going to be every 10 years. Once we do this, it's a 10-year map, right?
So I would
Pretty
clarify,
much.
That's the requirement that you have to do it with a census.
Oh, okay,
You
so
can
you
do
can
it
do
whenever
it.
you want.
Okay,
If-
okay,
if-
okay.
Yes.
If for whatever reason, the board felt that it was time to look at redistricting, we could do it. You just
Yeah.
can't go longer than every 10 years.
And it seems like it takes a lot of time, effort, and money to do so. So that's why my thing would be, let's taking into consideration growth. If we do, put a little Band-Aid approach on this and say, hey, let's get this done right now, and then knowing that we're gonna have, 20,000 new homes in Division 5 or whatever, and have to do it again in 3 years. So that's my only concern, is just looking at the future growth and possibly mapping to make that consideration. And it sounds like you've already done that, but yeah, it looks good to me, either one.
Yeah, to somewhat, option 2 accounts a little bit more for growth without really carving into Division 5 significantly. But if you have immediate growth that we know it's in construction, it's imminent in Division 5, having Rancho Tesoro, the Creek area, obviously University District, and also Discovery area. Division One actually has significant growth, but that's pushed out for future. So, 2030-ish, 2025, 2030 and beyond. And so Division One still has that growth coming, but we're not going to see it. We're going to go through at least one or two more census cycles before we really see significant growth in Division One.
Gotcha.
Division 4 and 3 are pretty much built out. 4 and 2 are pretty much built out. And Division 3 has some growth, but it's not significant. Obviously, the main part is University District over by the college. That's the most significant portion.
Gotcha.
Thank you for all of this work, James. I know that a lot went into it. I just want to clarify, no current sitting directors have been districted out of their district. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair Boyd Hodgson, if I can ask James to clarify the dates. So our regular meeting dates are the first and third Wednesdays of a month, and that would put it on the 16th of both February and March. And you showed the 23rd, so were we?
Yeah, I looked at sorry, you know what it was, is the engineering committee is the fourth day of the month now, Tuesday or Wednesday, and I was looking at that on my calendar. So
Okay.
I'll clarify the dates.
But the plan is to put it on the second regularly scheduled meeting of each of those months, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it would be the 16th.
Okay.
Of those months.
Thanks, James.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Thank you. I agree with Director Pennock in that we do need to plan for growth, and I think these maps are a great start. We'll see what BBK comes back with, and then we'll see what the public comes back with if they have any input. This was a lot of work. I appreciate you doing it. Thank you. It's a complicated process.
Thank you, Director.
Okay, old business, update on the VWD scholarship program.
Yeah, so Chris is on the line too, and Chris is going to address this. And I did put a handout at each of the directors' seats that shows the draft staff report. So Chris, why don't you jump in?
Thank you, General Manager Pruim. So where we left off last time was basically coming up with those parameters for the scholarship program, and feel that the next step really is to take the recommendations from the committee and bring them before the whole board. Recommend that we offer $1,000 scholarships to one student at each Palomar College and Cal State San Marcos, as well as one senior at each of the following: Mission Hills, San Marcos High, Foothills/Twin Oaks, and then High Tech High, North County High School. So a total of 6 scholarships annually, requiring an annual direct cost of $6,000. Payment would be made to the student, and the process would be that the students would submit an application, an essay, a letter of recommendation, and then a financial needs worksheet. And the P3 committee would ultimately be the competition judges, make sure that bring the scholarship recipients to the board of directors for approval each year. And next steps, once the board approves the concept, would be to check with legal counsel, make sure there's not any legal issues with an application package or a timeline, and then develop an outreach effort to get this out to students at both the high schools and the colleges, using the counselors and monthly bulletins, and there's typically some sort of notes home that go to the high schools, and then information at both the colleges. And we'd also use press releases and announce the program on the website and social media and so forth. So if the committee thinks that's a good tact, I would recommend that we move forward that direction.
What are your thoughts?
I don't know, I think it looks great. I don't have any, good job. Excellent job. I think it's a great PR move. I think it looks at the future as far as providing, I know we've been to a few meetings recently as far as just the need for replacing our future employee force. And no, I don't have any problems with anything written on this review. And no, it looks good to me.
I agree. Thank you for doing this work. I'm so pleased that we are able to offer this, and I think it's going to be just a great addition to the community service that Vallecitos does. I think it's going to be something that grows in the community and, provides goodwill towards the district, and it helps young people and career transitioners and veterans and folks that want to work in water to be able to make that happen more easily. So thank you. I'm really pleased with this. I have no comments.
If I could just maybe one piece of clarification. At our last meeting, I think we talked about whether it would be reimbursable, they have to show receipts, or we're just giving them $1,000. So just before we take this to the board, I'd like to make sure that we explain to the board how it's going to work. What is the mechanics of it? I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but that's a fundamental distinction, whether it's reimbursable or that they have to show the receipts for what they've spent, or are we just giving them $1,000 and trusting that they use it for the purposes it was intended?
I think one of the things that we had talked about, and I thought we landed on just giving it to them, but one mechanism of accountability is that we're asking them to provide, and this was Director Pennick's idea, I believe, a sort of a financial needs sheet to sort of get them to think through a little bit what they would use the money for, and I'm in favor of enabling them off the top.
I agree. Maybe not reimbursable, but like reportable, like after they used it to come back and just report, yeah, I used it towards books or housing or scholar, or just tuition. So I don't know, I would give it to them and make it reportable, but not reimbursable.
Okay, and then that's how we'll present it to the board, if that's the committee's recommendation moves in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, if these are folks that need money, let's give them the money. Let's not create yet another barrier to
Great.
them being able to succeed.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I agree. Yeah, but it would be nice to hear from them. I mean, almost a gesture of thank you as well, just, hey, thank you so much, that scholarship went towards. And there's no proof to that, just a nice report at a meeting like this.
Agreed. Great. So this is what we'll move forward with to the full board? That's the next step, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for all of that work. Any other comments or questions about that?
Good job, Chris.
Yeah, great. Okay, update on the Bill Dean program.
Yeah, so no movement there. At the last meeting, I think I mentioned that it's not targeted to be presented until, I think Bill is going to start going into the classrooms, I think it was March or April. It's whenever the school handles their water program. So he's under contract, he's developing the program, still working on which school. He's meeting with school district staff and personnel. So I don't know the specifics of that, but it's all with the intent that when the school is ready to start delivering or presenting those programs in the classroom, that he'll be ready to hit the ground running at that time. So we're still on track.
Okay, thank you. So I will not add it to the next agenda. I think that's also what you're telling me, right? There's no movement.
You read
so-
between the lines well, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe if something comes up and it's not on the agenda, I'll report
Okay.
out at the next
Great,
meeting.
thank you. Okay. Policy, new business, recommendations for ordinance 216 governing the committees and leadership structure of the board.
Yes.
So
Go ahead.
I asked for this to be brought forward because Director Pennick and I are in a sort of an interesting situation that we're both new board members. And we do have a policy that stipulates that each of us will be able to serve as president during our first term. Traditionally, the way that the succession has been is that someone serves as vice president first, and then they move into the president position. So in order to do that, in order to cycle through, if my math is correct, one of us needed to be appointed as vice president if we were going to follow historical precedents. But that didn't happen. Nobody caught it. I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything malicious. I'm just saying it was an oversight. So I asked for it to be revisited so that we can figure out how we are going to accommodate our existing policy. So that's why I asked for this to be brought forward.
I would say it's two things. So yes, to everything you said, and this is part of the broader, we're going to start bringing policies and ordinances and resolutions to the committee for review. So this was brought forward as the first one to kind of use as a trial balloon, and it encompassed exactly what you're talking about, Director Boyd Hodgson, that it touched on that president, vice president rotation. which is really the issue of practice versus the policy, and they're kind of colliding maybe at this point in time. So but what you're talking about is only one piece of ordinance 216, so maybe we can address that aspect first, and then we can step back and look a little broader at 216 and say, is there anything else that we want to recommend for changes to the board?
I agree. I think that's fine. I just, you know, I know how these things work. The longer we wait, if there is going to be an adjustment, the harder it will be to make the
Yes.
adjustment. So I agree with that, and I recognize this is a very broad policy. It's got a lot of moving parts. It talks about how we govern ourselves as a board, and I do believe that we need something in place. So sure, let's talk about it. And I think, you know, Director Pennick and I can, you know, we can have a conversation about what we would like to see, any changes that we would like, and then we will bring it forward for the full discussion. Right? That's typically the way
Correct.
we would do it? Okay.
So I guess maybe if we just focus on the president, vice president. So I think, I'm going off memory here right now, but Director Hernandez is currently the vice president. If he were to become president next year, and I believe it's Director Boyd Hodgson would then be vice president. And then
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but sure.
just following practice, right? The
Okay.
rotation amongst the divisions, and then the following year, and then when you become president, then Director Pennick would be vice president, but then we would run out of time
Right.
within that 4 years for him to have his opportunity at president. So I think that's the specific issue that you're talking about,
Yes.
is maybe next year we need to be more thoughtful about that ascendancy in office to provide that opportunity. Now, it's possible that neither of you wants to be president, and that's fine. If you want to opt out and say, I don't care, that's an opportunity. If both of you are, then we should factor that into it. And whether that's in the ordinance or covered in some other manner, that's up to the committee and the board ultimately.
No, and I see I see the conflict between policy and practice, because we're practicing something that is not written in policy.
Right.
And, I mean, to be honest, I mean, as far as this specific scenario, I don't have any desire either way. I mean, if it works out, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I am not gonna cause any problems. But, I mean, so for the future, like Director Boyd Hodges says, is there something we need to put in here in policy so a scenario like this does not happen? And I don't know. I don't know if we just continue it as practice, as traditional practice. This is just the way it works out. And every once in a while, if you've got two board members that come in at one time, one's not going to have the opportunity to serve as president, or I don't know. We just talk about it, discuss it, and not put it in policy, or just continue as practice. But I think what you want to do is have this resolved so this doesn't come as a problem down the road.
I think
And put it into a policy.
at the highest level, if the board still wants it to basically say what it says, is that each director shall have an opportunity in their first 4-year term.
Is that written somewhere, or is that just
It's in here.
practice?
It's in here.
Oh,
It's in
okay,
here.
okay.
It doesn't say they have to be, it says they will be given an opportunity. So what does that mean? It doesn't say that they will be president in their first 4-year term, it says they'll be given an opportunity to be the president. So some may say, well, the wording doesn't specifically say that, we may need to clarify that. If that is the board's intent, that we still want each board member in their first 4-year term to serve as president, then we probably should make some modifications to the ordinance to more formalize how we move through the offices, how we move through the steps. Because right now, it doesn't talk about the vice presidency. It doesn't say that in their first 4-year term, they should have an opportunity to be vice president. It just says presidency, so that linkage between ascendancy in office from vice president to president is not addressed in here at all. And that may be helpful if we still want to have the first part where each of the board members in their first 4-year term does have an opportunity to be president, then we should also address the vice presidency issue as well. Does somebody need to have served as vice president in order to serve as president? Our practice has been, yes, that's how we do it. We give somebody they get to drive in the co-pilot chair for a while before they move up to be the full pilot. But the ordinance doesn't say it has to be that way. You don't have to have experience as vice president in order to be qualified as a president. So that's the subtle aspect. And my recommendation is let's deal with that first part first. do we still want it to say what it says, that each person shall have an opportunity in their first 4-year term? And if the answer to that is yes, then staff can put some wording in there that will try to make recommendations as to how that can mechanically happen. Because it will conflict with the historical rotation and practice that we've had. And that's fine, as long as all the board members understand that. We'll deviate from that kind of rotational past practice. And depending, and I think Director Boyd Hodgson, you brought this up at the last meeting, it doesn't always become a problem. It depends on election cycles and who got elected when, and if there's no change in office, maybe it's not a big deal. If there's a big change, we may have to rethink everything. But in no case are we gonna have 5 new board members in any election cycle. At most, you'd have 3, and even that's unlikely that you'd have all 3 at the most up for election being unseated. So a lot of what ifs in there, but I guess I'd be looking for direction from the committee. Is the first part important? Is that what we want it to say, that each one shall have an opportunity, and then we can talk about the second part?
My own thoughts are, I do like that aspect of it. I mean, we all run for this office to be elected because we have ideas.
Right.
And as the president, you have the opportunity to shape the policy of the board and shape the direction of the district, and that's rewarding. You know, I'm not sure, to me, it sounds like we're kind of mincing words about what does opportunity mean. To me, it means you will be in the president's seat. That's what that means. You will be in the president's seat at one point during your first 4-year term. And I like the idea that we would give multiple people the idea to shape the direction of the board and also rotate through. I mean, we don't have term limits in this seat. It's possible that if we didn't have some kind of stipulation, someone could be reelected and serve as president, you know, for a decade. And I don't think that that's right either. So I am in favor of continuing what has been practice and policy, and that is to rotate through. However, that needs to be added so that it is, you know, the intent matches the letter. I'm in favor of that.
So, and I agree, and that sounds good. It seems like the sticking point is the vice presidency and the tradition from going from vice president to president. I don't think there needs to be, because truly, what does a vice president do? It's just a name anyways. I don't know if they have to ride in the co-pilot seat for a year in order to rotate into that presidency seat. I mean, so I think that's the sticking point. I don't think we need to follow that traditional from vice president to president. I mean, if you're vice president next year and then I haven't had the chance to be a vice president the 4th year, I just go from a board member to the president. You know, and that would give everybody the opportunity to sit as president without maybe 1 or 2, or every once in a while, every 10 years, depending on cycles, having the opportunity to be a vice president first and then a president.
But I think then that sets up a conflict, right? Because if that scenario played out, and I didn't know that there was sort of also a unspoken order of the districts. This is the first time I'm hearing of that. But let's say next year I'm vice president, then that sets me up to be president, but then you haven't been president, so then we are trying to figure out who's going to be president. Only one of us can be president, and one of us
Right.
didn't get to be president during the first 4 years.
Just gives the other one the incentive to run for another term.
So, in thinking about this, there is historical precedence, and it has, it minimizes conflict, I think. If we're open to having that conflict, then I guess we're open to having that conflict. But, I think the way the policy is written, even if 3 board members turned over, if a new board member was the vice president, their first year in office, it would still work, even if 3 board members turned over. So the math of it isn't off. But when you make it so that you go against historical precedent, then that takes away opportunity, I think, for people to choose their vice president, and also for the vice president expecting to be president the next term. It sets us up for conflict too. So.
Yeah, just to maybe put some more specificity to it. If we kept going forward, either Director Pennick would be the odd man out, right? In his 4-year term, he wouldn't get to be president, or we'd probably have to skip over President, or Director Hernandez progressing from vice president to president next year.
And he may not be okay with that,
And
right?
he may not be okay with that,
So-
and that's what we're dealing with right
Yeah.
here. So there's gonna be an odd person out, one way or the other. The policy and the practice are gonna collide in this next 2-year period. So that's why it's helpful to find out what are we trying to accomplish, and then we'll figure out how to get there.
And-
So
well,
that,
I
that
mean,
bigger
and
picture is the important
We're
part.
in a tough spot because we didn't follow the policy, right? We didn't follow it this time. So we're in a tough spot, as Director Hernandez pointed out.
Well, I
that-
wouldn't say we didn't follow the policy, because the policy doesn't bind us. The policy doesn't address the vice presidency. We could still comply with the policy by appointing Director Boyd Hodgson as president next year, and then Director Pennick the year after that. Then that complies with the ordinance. That everyone, the two of you, the two new ones, your first 4-year term, would have both had an opportunity to be president. So it's not too late. What we would do is we would conflict with practice.
I see
So
what you're saying.
it's not too late to comply with policy, but it would conflict with the practice in the remaining time that we have. That was gonna happen regardless. The only way to do this would have been to to conflict with our practice to comply with the policy. Because then Director Hernandez wouldn't have ascended to the vice presidency. It would have probably been you, Director Boyd Hodgson, and then the following year would have been Director Pennick, and then you could have moved through the seats. But in any case, the policy and the practice were on a collision course. We just delayed it a year, but we can still comply with the ordinance next year.
Has this not happened before?
Not in the time I've been here. There's been very little turnover on the board, and with the way the board seats have been, there haven't been any bumps in the time I've been here. I haven't gone back before that.
All right.
And Director Hernandez did mention that somebody had to get bumped off their seat at a previous time. It was just before I was here, so. But the district moved on, right? We said, hey, the policy was bigger than the practice, and this is gonna happen, and I think that's how it got resolved previously.
So the question is, do we need to rewrite the policy? I guess.
Do you want that policy to say that? Do you want it to say that everybody shall have the opportunity? And if so, we can get you there.
I mean, where's it now? I'm trying to find it here. Is it,
It's,
It's in section
1.9?
1.9 on page
1.9.
3.
Yeah.
okay, what, 1 point, that's what I was looking at. First one,
Yeah, the board shall
B.
reorganize at the first meeting and appoint or reappoint its officers. And then,
board policy determines the board.
It's
reorganization.
C.
look, section B. Yeah,
Director
section
will
B.
have the opportunity to hold the office of president once during the first term.
So it doesn't address vice president.
Serves at the pleasure of the board. That's what I guess my question is, I don't know if what do we rewrite in there unless, I mean, because I think you explained it well. Policy, we didn't violate any policy, any procedures. It was just a practice and how, because of every once in a while this will come up and we're dealing with it exactly how we should, I think, is just talk about it and make correction. Like you said, possibly it could have been done now, and so we should have been more forward-looking when we did this reorganization. But we're still not out of
Yeah.
policy.
So my recommendation, it's really hard, when you look at the policy, you don't know what's gonna happen in future elections. If you stuck with the practice, you may find that somebody just got elected to office, brand-new person, and then it's their turn to be president. So they would have never served as vice president to honor both the policy and the practice. They'd go brand new, hey, you're just got elected, congratulations, you're the president of the board. It's like, wow, that may not be what they want either. I don't think that's happened since I've been here either, that a newly elected person was up in rotation based on our practice to become president, but the potential is there. I don't know that we could write a policy that could cover that unless it said, in the event that a newly elected board member is on deck to become president, they should be delayed a year, give them some experience. I think it would be in the district's best interest to not have a newly elected person serve as president.
Maybe I'm not following, but I don't think the math works that way. A newly elected person could be vice president, but even if 3 people were elected, you wouldn't have a newly elected person assuming the presidency.
Well, what I'm saying is
Right.
if you honored practice, and the practice says, hey, it's Division Three's time to be president, and we just had a newly elected person in Division 3.
maybe I don't know what this practice is, because it's not written down anywhere. Can you just
Well, so
explain
the
that?
practice it's the rotation. So if you remember.
Numerically?
I'm sorry?
Numerically, or
Yeah,
what
well,
do you mean?
it works out that way. So in the first meeting in December, when we do this reorganization, we always include the last 10 years. Here's been the president and vice president in order of rotation. And you could put numbers to that and say, oh, that was Division 5. They went from vice president to president, and they went to the bottom of the batting order, and they moved back up. By division, the names of those people change, right? Somebody got reelected, and if they happen to be on deck, if Division 3 happens to be on deck and a new person is voted into Division 3, boom, they're in the catbird seat right on day one.
Okay, I see. This is the first I'm hearing about this, and I didn't notice the pattern.
Yeah, so that,
And
that's
do the research.
That's
Okay,
why we
gotcha.
hand that out and that's when I refer to practice, that's what I mean, is that we move them up. If you look at for those longer standing members, let's use Director Hernandez, because he's the longest standing one. You'll see there's a frequency of him going through vice president and presidency. It's like every 5 years.
Okay, that's too much to expect for new board members to have figured out that pattern,
Yeah,
honestly.
well, and
So I'm glad you're explaining it now, but this is the first we've heard of it.
Yeah, well, that's when I apologize, because when I always refer to the rotation, that's what I mean. It's this rotation that it just goes by a periodic nature that people move through, and basically it's based on their division. There may have been some upsets in the past for other reasons where the order got changed, but right now, since I've been here, the order by division has stayed the same, that people move through the seats on the board. The seats, there's only two, right? The vice president and the presidency. But if you set up an ordinance, or if you stuck with the policy and said it shall be, if you wanted to incorporate the practice and the policy, you do set yourself up for brand new people becoming the president. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I just want the board to know that that could potentially happen in the future. So we should anticipate that it could happen and either prevent it from happening or acknowledge that it could happen and just say, a newly elected board member could function as the president. I'm not saying that they couldn't. It may not be the best practice.
So our practices are written down or they are not written down?
That practice is not. It's just historically, we just report every year, we give the board members the knowledge to say, hey, for the last 10 years, here's what we've done.
Okay, so resolutions and ordinances are written down.
Those are written down.
So it's not, practices and resolutions and ordinances are not equivalent.
They are not.
So I understand what you are saying, but I am less concerned about a practice that is just tradition and not written down versus something that is an ordinance or a
Yep.
resolution. That's kind of the way I feel about it. The basic question that we have sort of bringing it down to the basic question is, do we believe that each person should have the opportunity to serve as president? And I do. I feel that we should. And I would like that to not change. Regarding the vice presidency, that is not written down. I'm not sure that we need to add it, because like you said, I think, we can still make accommodations.
Right.
But not knowing that there's this practice, because it's not written down anywhere, and I was just given a list of names and expected to figure that out, it was concerning to me as a new board member, thinking, oh, well, when do we get our chance? And I didn't know that I would have been next in line.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I was planning on you being the person. But I think that this policy, I think that we should stick with the policy, but I think that there needs to be attention paid to this in a way that, this isn't the first time that the board is reorganized.
Right.
So that's what I would like to see, and I feel like if we didn't mention it, that it would just go unmentioned.
Yeah, and it would have been addressed. So I did have the conversation with incoming President Elitharp. I said, hey, here's where we're heading. He goes, and he asked me, couldn't we resolve this the next time? And I said, absolutely. It would mean skipping over Director Hernandez, sending from vice president to president, and that's fine. But if the board wants to say, hey, the policy or the ordinance trumps a practice, so next year, next November, December, when we do this reorganization, I would include in the staff report that says we would need to accommodate a different order of ascendancy in office to comply with the policy. then it's up to the board. If the board says, no, we don't want to do that, if they want to say, hey, opportunity doesn't mean they don't get it, whatever, but it would be brought up, we'd say, hey, this is your, and I'll say, really, next year is the last opportunity the board will have to be able to comply with the policy as written. Because if they don't make Director Boyd Hodgson or Director Pennick president next year, and the other of you two the year after, then you would have violated or not complied with the policy. It's not too late. We still have time to do it, and skipping over Director Hernandez going from vice president to president doesn't violate the policy. It would deviate from practice. So it's not too late. We've had the conversations behind the scenes of how to address this next year, and that was our intent. And all that can be done without changing the policy at all, or the ordinance. The ordinance, as written, we can comply with the ordinance by doing something that deviates from practice in 2022. Doesn't mean we can't change the ordinance. I'm just saying we don't need to change the ordinance if the board wants to comply with that.
Yeah, I just, it's a lot to ask for someone who's vice president to not be president. That is my concern, because we did not, because we either have violated practice or we are about to violate practice. I don't have a lot of confidence that we are going to be able to comply with this ordinance. I just, I'm trying to crystal ball it, and, human nature being what it is, unless Hernandez gets voted out. So I remain concerned. And I wish that we would have been proactive rather than now being in the position of being a bit reactive. What I would like to see is for Director Pennock to be voted in vice president, so that we comply with practice and the ordinance. But it doesn't sound like that's going to be a reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
Because, as you've mentioned, when this comes up again, the board could say, oh, no, we want Director Hernandez to be president. And then one of us has sacrificed our opportunity, and that's not in the spirit of the ordinance.
Although policy should trump practice though, so.
I agree.
So
I agree.
that should happen. A quick, just practical question. I mean, I understand the role and responsibility of a president, and I know they work with you more closely on a regular basis. Is there any role or responsibility of vice president except step in when the president's not available? I mean, does he work with you? Is there any more,
Nope.
anything different with the vice president?
No, in the 5 years I've been here, I've never met with the vice president, other than when the president has not been able to,
Right.
they've been out of town on vacation or something. Their primary role is to serve as president in the absence of the president.
And that's it? There's
That's
no
their
other
role.
role or responsibility on a month-to-month basis?
Nope.
Except if the
none.
president's not available?
Yeah, and I guess I would caution that I don't like when we use the word comply with practice. You
Right.
may be deviating, but complying makes it sound more like it's more formal. If we would have been more, as you said, more proactive, and not made Director Hernandez the vice president, then he would have the argument that we've conflicted with practice already. It may have been before he rose to the level of vice president, but he would have said, hey, it's my turn to be vice president. If you don't make me vice president, you're violating past practice. So whether that being proactive would have, either way, it would have conflicted with past practice, even if we had addressed this in December of 2021, as opposed to December of 2022. In either case, the practice is going to conflict. It's on a collision course with the policy. And I agree with both of you. The ordinance and policies trump the practices. The time to address that is next year. That's the latest we can address it. And we can still get to where both of you have an opportunity to serve as president in your first 4-year term. Mm-hmm. If the board wanted by majority vote, voted to conflict with the ordinance, then that may be a legal question. Maybe Director or General Counsel Gilpin needs to say, oh, you can't knowingly vote to do something that violates your ordinance. We have not done anything like that yet. December 2022 will be the test. And the staff report will probably say that either Director Boyd Hodgson or Director Pennick needs to be president in order to comply with ordinance 216 or whatever number it is at that point in time. Undoing what was done in December of last year is probably a little bit more awkward, but it has the same effect. It reconciles the conflict between the practice and the policy.
Well, I think that's what we're both looking at. Something's gonna change, whether we do it now and we make some changes now, what's gonna be less awkward,
Yes.
less disruptive, or down the road.
Yeah, well, my recommendation is December 2022, in the staff report, it'll say exactly what I just said. One of the two of you needs to be voted as president in order to comply with the ordinance, unless the ordinance changes between now and then. And
Based
report
on the
further.
batting order that you've used in the past,
Right, and the staff report would further say this would conflict with our past practice of rotation.
right,
But the ordinance trumps the past practices.
so then.
That's a staff report. That's a recommendation from your general manager. What the board does with that information is up to the board. I don't vote. But the staff report would help guide the board as to how to comply with their ordinances and policies. And acknowledge when it conflicts with things like practices.
And like you said, but based on next year, if we approach this, the batting order shows that Director Boyd Hodgson would be the president without having the opportunity to be vice president.
Correct. So that's what would happen. So it deprives Director Boyd Hodgson the opportunity to be the vice president
That's what I
leading
look
up
at.
to her presidency. And it may do the same thing for Director Pennick. Following the practice, the next president, you would be president, Director Boyd Hodgson, you would be president before Director Pennick, based on past practice in the rotation. Whether either of you serves as vice president in the meantime is in a way irrelevant. And it certainly doesn't conflict with the policy, because as you see, the policy does not address the office of vice president.
Well, and that's why I asked roles responsibility. It doesn't look like there are any. It's just name only,
Right.
what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these things are messy when we try to figure out is there a way to word the ordinance that would anticipate every possible combination of things? And I don't know that there is, because you don't know what's gonna happen in future election cycles. We saw this a year ago. We knew this was coming, and I talked with Director Elitharp at the time and said, hey, you're due to be president. How do you want us to handle this? And he asked do we have time to correct it after this? I said, yes, we do. And it's exactly what we said, that the two of you would be presidents in 22
Succession.
and 23, actually serving in 23 and 24, but elected in those 22 and 23 times. So we were comfortable moving forward with that, even though we acknowledge that it's gonna, the collision course, all we did was we delayed the collision by a year. But they were gonna collide, regardless.
I think it would have been appropriate at the last board meeting when it was brought up to mention that you've already had these conversations. Because Director Pennock and I didn't know that. So I'm not sure that we need to change the ordinance. I'm comfortable going to the full board. But I think that this is a conversation that we do need to have in the company of everyone else, because we are talking about a lot of things that would, that may not be palatable to the people that need to do the acting at the time that they need to do the acting, and so I think it's a conversation for all of us, and it's a tough conversation, but it's where we are. So I don't think we need to make any changes, at least to that piece. Now, I know that we've talked about bringing the ordinances forward. Presumably, they'll come to the policy committee first as we are reviewing them. I'm not sure what that mechanism looks like or what that process looks like, but, bringing this to the agenda, primarily, my motivation was to talk about that specific piece of it.
Okay.
Well said.
So we can continue the conversation on the broader implications of ordinance 216, or we can defer it till the next policy committee meeting, and staff could maybe make some specific recommendations. There aren't a lot. I've looked through the ordinance on numerous occasions. There's a couple of areas that I think we need to address or clarify. Otherwise, it's pretty good. There's some other issues like director travel, whether it's included in here or another, it's kind of addressed in here, but it's also addressed in the employee handbook. But whatever the committee's preferences, if we want to defer it till the next policy meeting, and we can go into greater depth on the implications or the potential modifications to ordinance 216.
Do you have a preference?
I don't, no preference whatsoever.
Let's
Yeah, I
maybe
think
move it to the next one.
let's move it to the next one,
Okay.
but I would like to see this discussion about the specific aspect of 216 that we've been talking about today. I would like to see that at the next, on the next agenda of the full board meeting.
Regarding the president and vice president?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
we can say, hey, we had this discussion at the policy committee, and I can try to the best of my ability, faithfully present what was, and both of you can obviously share there. It probably won't be on the next meeting, because this afternoon, we're finalizing, we have to post the agenda, so it'll probably be the meeting after. I don't know if there's an urgency to it.
Well, I mean, there was, that's why I brought it up at the last meeting.
Yeah.
I think having these these are tough conversations, and I think the longer we drag them out, the harder they may get. So, I brought it up at the last meeting, and the idea was that it wasn't an emergency, so we didn't discuss it at the last meeting.
Right.
And, I know that I'm not the one that makes the agenda, but I feel like this is something that we do need to discuss. And I would like to see it on the next agenda.
Yeah, I could probably try to put together a rudimentary staff report that would be more of a placeholder than anything.
Sure.
And then that'll give us the opportunity to discuss it. More of it'll be a presentation than it is reading content in a staff report, but I think we can get it on the next agenda.
Good.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I think that is it for policy, new business, old business, update on single-use plastics resolution.
Yeah, and I think Chris is still with us. I think Chris is going to handle that item.
Thank you, General Manager Prum. So I'm going to share my screen if I can figure out how to do that again. I sent out to the committee and others what I drafted up. I was able to talk to Julia Moss, who's the clerk over at the City of San Marcos. Got a copy of their resolution. It's obviously a lot longer and more complex than ours is, or what ours would need to be. But the point being is, I've got the appropriate references in the draft resolution and put it before the committee so that the committee could add additional whereases or remove some of those whereases, paragraphs as they see fit. And then we could bring this before the board for approval.
Chris, what are you looking for from today's meeting?
So, am I able to share the screen? Is it showing up now?
We can see it.
Okay, good. So that's the draft resolution I sent to the committee members. What I'd really like is for the two committee members to look over the resolution and say, maybe we add in a specific paragraph that adds in this language or that language, or if there's one of the whereas paragraphs that you'd like me to remove, I can remove it. But this is just what I crafted up as a draft for the committee to review before bringing an item to the full board of directors.
And, the two committee members may be somewhat new in looking at resolutions, but the punchline is usually right at the end, the now therefore. So really if you look at the very end, it says now therefore the board issues this resolution in support of City of San Marcos's ordinance. It's not really committing us to anything, but we're saying, yeah, we think what they did is the right thing. It doesn't have a whole list of other now therefores. It says we're going to do this, this, and this, consistent with what they've done.
Yeah, and I think that was the point of this, is to show support, because we obviously only control our internal practices. And I think that the whereases outline that nicely, the things that we are considering doing as a district. And I'm supportive of that. I think I think the only one that, if we were going to strike one, the only one that I would strike is the one about the California State Legislature. I just didn't see how that was, I'm not sure exactly how that's relevant. Maybe we need to add more, something like, and this may impact our future practices or something like that, but I think as it is, I'm not sure that it needs to be in there, but I'm okay with it staying in.
Director Boyd Hodgson, you're not gonna hurt my feelings if you wanna strike that one. That was in the city of San Marcos's, it was in their resolution. I modified it to fit us. But again, it doesn't hurt my feelings. It was just, one of the ones that I looked at and thought, okay, this could work. But, it definitely doesn't need to be there to get our point across.
Yeah, to me, it's missing the and why does that impact us? So if we wanted to keep it, I would just add something like, and you're going to be better at it, but, and this may impact our practice, what we do at Vallecitos or practices or something like that. But I'm okay either way. I think it's really good. Thank you, Chris, for putting the work into this.
No problem. And I think with the cities, it was, hey, the legislature may make us do this anyway, so we're just gonna get ahead of it.
Oh, that's the implication. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's what's implied, I think, for the city. For us, it's really not the same kind of thing. And it's just real easy to strike it. It's just a whereas paragraph. And again, I can remove it really quickly and we can move this forward to the board.
Do you have any thoughts?
I don't.
You want to take it out?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, let's take it out.
Sounds good.
It almost makes it a one-pager.
That's right, it almost does. Just decrease the font to
I'm
size
good with
11.
one page instead of two.
Chris, with that modification, was it your intent to try to get it on the next board agenda or the one following?
No, I really should make sure, because it's a resolution, I really should put it to BB&K,
Okay.
just because that's typically what we do with the reso. So it would probably go on the
First meeting in February?
February agenda, but, we can get it on the first February agenda.
Okay.
That's great, thanks, Chris. I know that this was a long time coming and it was a lot of work, and I appreciate your efforts on it. Thank you. Any other comments?
Just agreed
Okay.
with what was said.
Prioritization of ordinance, resolutions, policies, review.
So we did this at the last meeting, and I think the committee came up with like a half a dozen, and we were going to start to bring those forward to the committee to discuss in detail, and 216 was really the first one. I didn't realize that it was only a piece of 216 as was agendized, so when we come back at the February meeting, we'll really start that process.
Great.
We'll dive into ordinance 216 in greater detail, and maybe I can remind the committee of which ones will be coming in subsequent committee meetings.
That would be great, because I know that we did have quite a few to choose from, but
We
I
did.
think we had a pretty good consensus on which ones to take up first.
That was
so,
my recollection, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we have kind of a structured process that we're going to be, or a systematic way we're going to be looking at, or be guided through that process of the review?
Well, no, and I was I guess I hear two questions in there. One is maybe more specific about how we deal with a specific one, and then the bigger picture about how do we figure out which ones are next. I was hoping that maybe by our experience in going through 216, I'd get a sense for how do we want to handle these on a piece-by-piece basis. And then in terms of the broader perspective of which ones are we taking forward, we'll just prioritize the ones that were listed. And if the committee in the intervening time says, hey, I just thought about this one, let's add that, that would be a good opportunity at the next meeting to say, hey, throw this on the pile.
Okay.
And maybe tell us where on the pile you want it to be.
Okay.
Things change, right?
Sure.
Something may come to your attention, or something may happen in the outside world that say, boy, we need to react to that quickly. Maybe it's COVID related or something that wasn't on our radar screen before, and it jumps to the forefront.
Okay.
And, yep, sounds good.
Okay.
It sounds like we have a pile and we're just gonna be shuffling that pile and
We do have a pile.
prioritizing
Yeah.
based on, and I'm good with that.
Okay. Great. Any other discussion points about that? I think we
Not
have our
from
marching
staff.
orders. Okay, great. Okay, next meeting date, February 7th, 2022. Any other comments? Did any members of the public come in, and should we offer them public comment if they did? Presume?
Still no members of the public other than Matthias, who's a staff member in there.
Okay.
Glenn,
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ann?
I just wanted to make sure that we're okay with the meeting dates, or we're going to do the second Monday of the month like we did last year? Because we didn't really talk about that at the last meeting, so.
Thank you for that reminder.
Okay, so the February 7th is the first Monday, right? That's what it shows.
Are you still okay with the first Monday?
I am, yeah, I have no
Okay.
problem.
Yeah, so I think what Ann's alluding to is sometimes we have conflicts with
Oh.
preparing board packets, engineering committee, finance committee. So we have this, Mondays got really popular really quickly. The finance committee meets on Mondays, the P3 committee, the engineering committee does. So depending on what the first or second Monday, and then if that's a week that we're leading up to a board packet. So let staff think a little bit more about that. For now, let's tentatively say February 7th for the committee, and maybe at the next meeting, we can bring forth a recommendation if we think we should change this or some other committee to kind of, I'll say, balance the staff workload. It doesn't change it overall, it is what it is, but if we can spread it out a little bit more, it certainly is helpful for staff.
Yeah, understood. That's a great idea, and, we don't take up any business that is urgently needs to be done on the first Monday, so
Yeah, I mean,
if it makes it easier, then we can move. I'll volunteer us to
Okay.
move.
Whenever, yeah, what does Ann want?
Yeah, well, and I'll meet with Ann. Her and I had a conversation before, and I'm fresh off of vacation, so it's a little fuzzy. But I can tell you, we're not just picking on the P3 committee. We've also asked one of the other committees to say, hey, could you shift from like the second Tuesday to the third Tuesday? Those types of things. We're just trying to balance things out. And I think I heard one of the staff members trying to.
Are you stuck on the first Monday?
No, it doesn't have to be the first Monday for me,
No.
that's fine.
In fact, the first Monday could be an issue just because that's a lot of, there's a lot of holidays on the first Monday. I mean,
Right.
Labor Day, there's some things. so-
I'll work with Ann and
Totally.
other staff, and we'll try to figure out, we'll give forth a staff recommendation as to what committee cadence is the best, and then hopefully the committees will agree.
And I think we're flexible.
Okay,
right? We're
thank
flexible.
you.
Hey,
for that.
Glenn,
Oh,
Yes,
totally.
Ann?
I know we had this conversation a while back, but just in moving the engineering committee to the fourth Tuesday of the month really helps.
Yep.
I'm not suggesting that we have to move the P3 committee, because that would be fine, but it's just, I just was wondering if they're happy with the schedule they had last year, and we're gonna go right into that. That's fine with me, it doesn't matter. But it does help, like I said, that the engineering committee has moved, so.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so for now, let's keep it on February 7th, and at the next meeting, we'll talk about it. If there are any recommended changes, we'll bring them forward. Otherwise, we'll stick with the first Mondays.
Sounds great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending. Happy New Year, and we are adjourned.